Our first topic tonight, crime and safety. Bernadette Rolen's son, Dan, was shot and killed by a Cleveland police officer in 2011. 10 years later, she still says that justice was not served. When Ideastream Public Media senior host Rick Jackson spoke with her recently, she talked about the need for police accountability.
The main thing in my situation was the police were investigating the police. So if there's an excessive force case, if there's some sort of, something that needs to be investigated because the police did something wrong, broke the law, whatever they did, someone else definitely needs to be in charge of that and not the police. The police cannot, how is that, that's biased to begin with. So how can they investigate each other? So that would be one of my main concerns, that they're not, they need some sort of third-party accountability.
Do you think the mayor's office or an investigator of the mayor's choosing would be an acceptable third party, or where do you think a mayoral office should fit into this?
Well, I think the mayor office should initiate that. I don't know that they should actually appoint somebody, but I do think that they should initiate it, maybe form a committee and the committee can decide who would be in charge of that. But I do think it's the mayor's responsibility. After all, it is his city and he does run the police force.
I want to begin with a discussion about issue 24. This is a charter amendment, proposed charter amendment that would give the Community Police Commission more power at all in disciplining and investigating officers. Mr. Bibb, this issue has drawn opposition from the police chief, from the safety director. You support issue 24. If you're elected and if this issue passes, you will no doubt face resistance from the police force in implementing this. If you are elected mayor, how will you get the police department to go along with this idea?
Well, this is personal for me. My dad was a police officer, and I remember having very vivid conversations about how to interact with the police officer as a son of a cop. He would say, Justin, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. But in this city right now, we spent over $30 million over the last 10 years trying to settle police misconduct claims. And I believe issue 24 is a positive step in the right direction to make sure we have more community voices around the table. Trust between residents and the police is critical to ensure that every community is safe and secure. And all across this country, you see good examples of this. Camden, New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey as well. When you have more community voices around the table, you get better accountability and you build the right kind of culture to make sure that our officers can come up to work every day with a good culture of policing. We have to try something new. The current system is broken.
Council President Kelley, my question for you is this. Currently, the safety director is one of the key decision makers in officer discipline. Last year, a report from the Consent Decree Monitor concluded that the previous safety director went too easy on officers accused of misconduct, in the Monitor's opinion. You oppose issue 24. How will a Kelley administration ensure that officer misconduct is handled appropriately?
Thank you, Nick. There's a lot of rhetoric, there's a lot of buzzwords, and a lot of viewers might not be sure about differences between the two candidates. This is a defining moment, both in terms of policy and how each candidate goes about decision making. Issue 24 would make our neighborhoods less safe. Issue 24 would result in hundreds of officers leaving the job. Issue 24 would result in slower response times. We need to look at what we have in place, which is the consent decree. If you look at the number of use of force cases since the signing of the consent decree, the number of complaints against the police, if you look at, and the figure, this $30 million that my opponent throws out, we need to be grounded in fact here. How many dollars have gone out since the consent decree? Those are things that go back to 1975 that we're paying out right now. The number of dollars paid since the consent decree is dropped dramatically. There are no significant decisions since that happened. And again, when you get on board with amending the charter, this is serious business. This should not be taken lightly. This is a critical issue. We need to do better. We need to defeat issue 24, and we cannot show any naivete that because it uses buzzwords like reform or accountability, that it is therefore good.
Mr. Kelley, thank you very much. Mr. Bibb, I'll give you 30 seconds to respond.
I believe Angela Miller's family deserves justice. Craig Bickerstaff's family deserves justice. And justice delayed is justice denied. $30 million is a critical number to think about, but it's the lives that have been lost due to police misconduct that we can't put a price on. And right now, as the mayoral candidate, I believe that democracy works. My opponent does not believe in democracy because once again, he wants to undermine the will of the people. Voters want to be heard on this issue, and I believe getting more voices around the table to create a better culture and better training protocols is a good step in the right direction to make sure our law enforcement have the tools they need to fight crime all across our city and restore trust on day one. That is essential.
Mr. Kelley, I gave you 30 seconds, and we'll move on to the next question.
So, we can talk about the tragic events that have happened, but that doesn't make this okay. You can try to, shroud any way you want, but again, $30 million has not been spent since the consent decree has been signed. It is naive to say to think that you can use a number settling cases from 1975 and make it relevant to today. And the fact that the argument that my opponent is not going to win this argument is the fact that he has to go to democracy and these things. I'm not against democracy. I don't have the power to stop this. This is going to the ballot. It's on the ballot. It is a charter amendment. It's serious. We cannot be naive. This shows a naivete in terms of the approach to government.
I do want to move on to the next question, but thank you both very much for this discussion. Our next question will be coming from Lawrence Daniel Caswell. Lawrence.
Thank you both for joining us today. Greatly appreciated. There is currently no public accounting for homicides that are solved or not solved in the city of Cleveland. This is a big issue for families who often feel like the police do not recognize their loss and aren't trying to get information out there that could help get tips and solve cases. Other cities do make that information available, make information about homicides available to the public. Washington, D.C., for example, posts printable online flyers with information on each unsolved case. As mayor, will you make information about solved and unsolved homicides available to the public? Why or why not?
Council President Kelley, we'll begin with you.
Thank you. Before getting to the heart of the question, I want to make sure that we all understand that our solve rate for homicides is unacceptable. And that's because we are not able to recruit and retain the talent that we need. And that's why we have to be cautious of something like issue 24 that will drive more officers away from the job. This is serious business. We have to make sure that all of our homicide detective positions are filled immediately. And as far as data in terms of what's available to the public, I've stated since the very beginning of this campaign, I support open data for every government record. I think it's important that the public has access to the records. Public records are the public's property, and I believe that they have access to them. But again, there can be nothing worse than losing a member of your family to violent crime. The only thing that could possibly make that worse is to have the Division of Police understaffed and under-resourced to solve that crime, to reach out to that family, to make sure that they're being felt, that their tragedy is our tragedy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bibb?
I've talked to so many voters across this city who are frustrated that when they lose a family member due to a gun violence in the city, that they can't get their call returned, that they're still fighting for justice. We need urgent leadership on this issue. Over the last 16 years since the council president has been at the helm in City Hall, we have nearly an 80% rate of not having filed these cases, right? And we can't afford more of the same. We need transparency. We need to have urgent leadership on this issue. And as mayor, I'm going to do a better job of making sure we beef up our homicide unit and work with other members of federal law enforcement to ensure we can solve these cases immediately. These families deserve the justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bibb. Council President Kelley, do you have a rebuttal you want to offer there?
Again,
just 30 seconds.
I promise. The goals of beefing up the homicide detectives, it's not that easy. You have to understand the dynamics, the challenges of hiring officers that we're facing today. It's not something you can just be for or against, or you say, I'm going to do this. Recruiting and training and retaining officers is hard. We have to make sure that we are laser focused on building a strong, diverse division of police. And I'm telling you, one way we can ensure that we won't do that is with issue 24.
Mr. Bibb, any rebuttal you'd like to offer?
Well, I would just, with all due respect to the council president, people are waiting. You've been in charge for nearly 16 years, and we haven't seen any real success around these issues. Issue 24 does a better job of ensuring we have better trust between police and residents, and that is critical to making sure that every community feels safe and secure.
All right, well, thank you very much, Mr. Bibb. Mr. Kelley,
sure.
Give you some more seconds, then we'll
Absolutely.
move on to the next question.
Appreciate. No, if you look at the time that I've been council president, since the consent decree has been signed, the numbers are the numbers. The facts are the facts. You can come up with different, buzzwords or things to talk about, but the fact is, I am the head of the legislative body, not the executive, but even as such, we have seen a decrease in the number of use of force cases, complaints against the police. We have cleared the complaints in the Office of Professional Services. The judgments that have been paid, they're the highest one, I believe, is $175,000, not $30 million.
Mr. Bibb, we'll give you a couple seconds, then we'll move on.
When's the last time you held a hearing to investigate how we address this issue?
We have held multiple hearings. I don't know why you don't know this,
okay, but
we have held multiple hearings. We meet with the monitor. Ever since the signing of the consent decree, we have had numerous, I don't know the number offhand.
80% of homicide cases have not been
you
solved.
talked about hearings. Do you want to know about the hearings? I don't know why you don't know this, but Cleveland City Council has been holding hearings, bringing the monitor to the table, bringing the monitoring team to the table, going over everything that's involved with this consent decree and what our progress is.
Thank you both, gentlemen, very much. I want to move on to our next question here from Elizabeth McIntyre.
Thank you both for being here today. Attracting and retaining jobs in Cleveland involves a lot of factors, including how safe workers feel. How would you address Cleveland's crime rate, and what role would you see the city's business community playing in making Cleveland safer?
Mr. Bibb, we'll start with you.
Well, number one, I want to make sure we deploy more of our officers on the beat. Right now, 50% of our cops are walking the beat. The other 50% are behind the desk. The allocation makes no sense to me. I want to have at least 70% walking the beat doing the hard work of community policing. Secondly, we have to pay our officers more. We're losing so many of our new police academy graduates to Shaker, Middleburg Heights, Beechwood, et cetera, because we're not paying officers enough to stay on the job. And then thirdly, we need to change the culture of our police department. Officers want fairness. They want to have a culture where talent is promoted, not based on who you know inside the department. And I would gladly work with the business community to make sure we are changing the culture of our department and leveraging some best practices from the private sector in order to do that inside our department.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bibb. Council President Kelley.
Thank you. We are not going to be able to bring the talent back, to downtown or to any neighborhood until we get our arms around this problem. This is something that's got to be dealt with immediately. And we need to look at how are we recruiting, how are we training, how are we retaining officers? Because this issue of safety isn't just in the neighborhoods other than downtown, it's in every neighborhood. And certainly as much as it is meaningful and essential to residents, it means the same thing to businesses. I've had conversations with some utility providers that they don't like to go in certain neighborhoods at certain times, and it's like working with the police, we get them there. We have to make sure that everybody believes in the safety of the people of the city of Cleveland. I have advocated for a real community policing program with mini stations, with foot patrols, with bike patrols, with a community relations committee between the residents and the command staff of each district to make sure that we have an active community service unit, which is an off-radio unit that responds to quality of life issues. We need to work with DCA to make sure that they're working hand in glove with the police to make sure there's a culture of safety everywhere in the city of Cleveland. There's not 50% behind the desk. The only creative way to get there is if you put every person who's injured, every sergeant, anybody who has some supervisory responsibility, and said that they're sitting behind a desk, which isn't true.
Thank you. Mr. Bibb, do you have a response you'd like to offer?
I would just say that the data points that we have more police per resident than many of our peer cities, Columbus, Indianapolis, Dayton, Toledo, yet those officers aren't deployed effectively. I was in Ward 1 the other day in Lee Harbor. You have 2 zone cars patrolling one of the largest districts in this city per shift. That's not good enough. We got to do a better job of redeploying our existing forces to make sure we have visible patrols all across our community. We got to change the culture at the top.
Mr. Kelley.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just say that there is a deployment plan, and every neighborhood believes that there's only 1 car in their ward. There are not just 2 zone cars per shift in Ward 1. I would just encourage anybody who wants to fact check this, just look at the deployment schedule. Policing is complicated. Policing's difficult. We need to make sure that we are working with our division of police through community relations committees to bring that trust, to bring police and the community together, and we can do that. We've done that in the 2nd District where I live ever since I've been on council. We've been doing community policing before it was a term, and it's something that I believe works. I think it's something that we can do in every single police district.
Thank you both very much